The fact that my mother-in-law secretly changed the locks while I was at work is still unbelievable, especially since she claimed my deceased wife gave it to her. I quickly showed her the official deed, which is in my name, and tossed her stuff onto the lawn. As a 36-year-old male, I'm still reeling from the shock of yesterday and needed to share this. It's going to be a bit of a lengthy story because there's quite a bit of context to provide. My wife, Sarah, died 8 months ago after a nearly 2-year fight with cancer. We had been together for 12 years, with 9 of those years spent married. We didn't have any children, just our 2 cats that Sarah cherished. Her death created a massive void in my existence, and I'm still learning how to deal with it daily. When Sarah received the stage 3 cancer diagnosis 2 years ago, her mother, Linda, immediately insisted on moving in to help with Sarah's care. At first, I was appreciative because I was working a full-time job to maintain our health insurance, and having someone else present when I was unable to be there was a blessing. Our home isn't sprawling. It's a 3-bedroom ranch that we purchased 7 years back, but we managed to make it function. Sarah occupied our bedroom, Linda took the guest room, and I sometimes crashed in the office when Sarah needed her privacy or wasn't feeling up to company. The truth is, Emile and I had a strained relationship, even before Sarah became ill. She frequently made little digs, implying I wasn't worthy of her daughter and that Sarah could have found someone better. She consistently challenged my choices. Sarah would always jump to my defense, and this would lead to clashes between them. However, once Sarah became unwell, we both, without speaking about it, agreed to set aside our disagreements for her. After Sarah died, I felt utterly adrift. I took 3 weeks away from my job to mourn, manage the funeral details, and attempt to come to terms with it all. While I was off, Emile continued to live in the house. I simply didn't possess the emotional strength to ask her to move out immediately. And frankly, having someone else there prevented the house from feeling totally deserted. When I returned to my job, we settled into this odd pattern where we mostly kept our distance. She'd occasionally prepare meals and leave the food in the refrigerator for me. I didn't argue about her moving the furniture around or redecorating sections of the house because, considering all that had transpired, it felt insignificant. My goal was merely to survive each day. Around 2 months following Sarah's death, Emile began to comment about the house. She'd say things like, "Sarah always adored this kitchen." She stated repeatedly she wanted me to eventually have it. Or, according to Emile, Sarah would want me to remain here and tend her garden. I mostly disregarded these remarks because grief often causes people to express unusual thoughts. I was really navigating my own emotional turmoil, you see. It's important to remember that Sarah and I were both listed as owners on the property's title when we purchased it. After Sarah's passing, I collaborated with a lawyer to change the deed, putting the house fully in my name, and it was all settled about a month following her memorial service. Then around the 4th month, things turned really strange. Emile started calling the house her house when chatting with the neighbors or when the delivery people showed up. She started taking my belongings out of our master bedroom, claiming she was tidying up. Whenever I'd bring it up with her, she would get all choked up and say, "Sarah wanted me to be happy here. You know that, right?" I didn't want to argue, so I just let a lot of it go. She also started rummaging through Sarah's legal papers and personal items. One afternoon, I came home and discovered her in our office, surrounded by all sorts of documents, even what looked like Sarah's last will and testament. When I asked what she was up to, she quickly collected everything and said she was merely taking care of Sarah's personal matters. Something about it felt off, but I was just too drained to make a fuss. I knew Sarah had written a will that named me as the only person who got anything, with some specific items designated for friends and family. I had, in fact, already filed it with the lawyer who handled the house transfer. About 4 weeks back, the conversation shifted to me finding a new place to live. Initially, the comments were gentle. Wouldn't a new beginning in a different locale be beneficial? Or, isn't this house holding you back from fully recovering? Once I firmly stated I wasn't budging, she became much more forceful. She insisted that Sarah would have desired me to give her the house. She claimed Sarah confided this when you were not present. Finally, I lost my cool and stated that the house was legally mine, that Sarah and I purchased it jointly, our names on the title, and that the property was legally transferred to me following Sarah's death. I clarified that even though I was thankful for her aid during Sarah's illness, she should begin making arrangements to leave. She went into a rage, sobbing and yelling that I was disrespecting Sarah's memory and that Sarah had promised her the house. I requested to see any proof of this promise, and naturally there was none. I even pointed out that I keep all critical property documents in a binder in my vehicle, including the current deed with only my name on it. But she brushed this aside, saying that this kind of documentation was irrelevant. After that argument, there was a complete freeze between us. She quit making meals or tidying up, just staring at me coldly whenever we were nearby. I began investigating the legal process for eviction, hoping I wouldn't need to, but wanting to be ready. I also started to keep a record of all our conversations, just in case. Yesterday's events were the absolute limit. I got back from a really draining day at my job, and my key wouldn't unlock the front door. Initially, I figured the lock was just being stubborn. It had been giving me trouble recently, so I went to try the back door. That key didn't work either. I was stuck in my own backyard, unable to get into my own house, still holding my lunch bag and utterly bewildered. This was the house Sarah and I picked together, where we'd created so many special moments over the last 7 years, and all of a sudden I couldn't even get inside. Then I saw Emile staring at me through the kitchen window, a look of self-satisfaction on her face. She walked to the door but didn't open it. She just spoke to me through the glass like I was some kind of stranger. "This isn't your house anymore," she told me. "Sarah left it to me in her will. I've spoken with a lawyer and we uncovered paperwork. You need to move out," she insisted. I was completely stunned. I was totally certain that Sarah and I were both listed on the mortgage. When we purchased the house 7 years back, we made sure that everything was jointly owned. After Sarah died, I went through all the legal procedures with a lawyer to put everything fully in my name. There was no way what Emile was telling me could be accurate. "Open the door, Emile," I said, trying to keep my composure. "This is my house and you know it. I purchased it with Sarah, and when she died, I legally put the place in my name. Unlock the door right now." "That's not happening," she stated. "I've swapped the locks because I'm the owner now. You can pick up your belongings when my attorney is here." Then, unbelievably, she actually shut the curtains on me. I just stood there for a full 60 seconds, unable to process what was occurring. Then I immediately phoned my friend Jake, who thankfully lives only 10 minutes away. While I was waiting for him, I contacted the police's non-emergency number to outline the situation. They told me they'd dispatch someone, but because it was a civil matter concerning the ownership of the property, there wasn't much they could really do besides keep everything calm. Jake showed up before the police, and he saw me on my front steps just like a teenager who'd been locked out. He asked, "Dude, what in the world?" after I explained. He instantly started figuring out solutions, mentioning that we could just break a window to gain access. I told him, "I'm not going to break into my own house." I suggested we wait for the police and manage this the right way. The police showed up approximately 20 minutes later. There were 2 officers, one older guy who looked like he had witnessed a lot, and a younger woman who seemed fresh out of training. I relayed the details of the situation. This was, in fact, my house. My mother-in-law had been residing with us throughout my wife's illness. She wouldn't leave, and now she had changed the locks while I was at work. When the police came to the door, Emile opened it right away, being all cheerful and friendly. Right away, she started to tell them that this place was her home, that her daughter had given it to her, and that I was giving her a hard time. "Can you prove you own this place?" the older officer asked her. Emile paused briefly, then answered, "Yes, my lawyer has all the necessary documents. Sarah told me many times that she wanted me to have the home." "Ma'am, spoken agreements aren't worth anything in real estate," the officer clarified. "Do you have anything written down?" I heard her say. "I have Sarah's will," she insisted. "She gave everything to me." That was new to me. I had gone through all of Sarah's papers after she passed. She did have a will, and it actually left everything to me, with certain items specifically designated for relatives and acquaintances. There was no mention of the house going to her mother in it. "Officers," I said, "I've got the deed to this home with my name on it. It was put in my name after my wife died. I have the proof in my vehicle." I walked to my car and got the folder where I store all my important paperwork, something I'd talked about with Linda during our disagreement last month. It's lucky I'm so well organized. I retrieved the deed with my name on it, the one that had been officially updated and transferred to me after Sarah died legally, and gave it to the police. They examined it, and the older officer gave a little head nod. "Sir, this looks like authentic paperwork proving you are the rightful owner of this home." He then spoke to Mill. "Ma'am, do you have any official papers that show you own this property?" She began to fumble around, explaining that her lawyer had the documents and that Sarah intended for her to get the house. The officers didn't seem convinced. "Based on the evidence we've reviewed," the officer informed her, "this man is the legal owner of this property. You must give him access to his home right away." Linda's expression shifted through a rapid succession of feelings in an instant. She continued to argue, stating she'd been living there for more than 8 months, even before Sarah passed away. But the officers remained unwavering about the legal situation. Eventually, she unlocked the door but remained in the doorway, preventing me from going in. "This isn't finished," she whispered, glaring at me. "Sarah wished for me to have this house, and you know it." "Move out of the way, ma'am," the female officer instructed. "You need to let the homeowner enter his property." Finally, Emil moved and I went into my own house. The place was a disaster. It appeared Emil had been rummaging through everything, pulling out documents and pictures. There were partially filled boxes in the living room. "What have you been doing?" I asked, surveying the mess. I was in the middle of figuring out what was mine when she lashed out. "Because you're attempting to get me kicked out of my daughter's place, the police suggested we both stay calm. They told Linda that since I legally owned the house, I could decide who lived there. The officers also initially mentioned that because she'd been residing there for a while, I might need to go through a formal eviction process. That was precisely what I'd been looking into over the last several weeks." However, the older officer then inquired, "Ma'am, do you have any paperwork showing you've been paying rent or helping with the mortgage?" "No," she responded with a challenging tone. "Sarah wouldn't take money from me for living in her house." "Sir," the officer addressed me, "have you ever received any payment from her while you stayed here?" "No," I said. "She came to help care for my wife. There wasn't any official arrangement for rent or a lease." The officer seemed to understand. "Based on that, from a legal standpoint, she's viewed as a visitor in your home, not a renter. You're allowed to ask her to leave, and if she doesn't, it may become trespassing." That completely matched up with what I'd uncovered while studying eviction rules during the past few weeks. Since there wasn't a proper rental contract or evidence of payments, she didn't have tenant rights. I glanced at Emil, and he was now flushed and trembling. "Linda, after the stunt you just pulled, swapping out my locks and trying to take my home, I'm ordering you out today. You absolutely cannot do this to me," she yelled at me. "Where am I supposed to go? This is Sarah's house." I clarified it was Sarah's and my house, but now it's only mine. "You have until 8 tonight to gather your belongings and get out." "That gives you 5 hours," I pointed out to her. She started bawling dramatically, letting out huge sobs about how terrible I was being and how Sarah would be so disappointed in me. The police officers looked uneasy but stood their ground. The woman officer spoke gently, asking, "Ma'am, do you have anywhere to go, like relatives or pals?" I chimed in, "Her sister lives 2 hours away. They're quite close. I'm not going anywhere." Emil asserted, "This is my house after all. Sarah wanted me to have it." The older officer released a heavy sigh, then told her she had 2 choices. "You can gather your things and go peacefully as the homeowner wants. Or, if you refuse, we'll have to arrest you for trespassing, and you'll be kicked off the premises right away with only what you can carry. I truly suggest you go with the first option," which seemed to finally click for her. Emil shot me a look of pure, raw hatred, and then stormed off towards the guest room to start packing. The officers inquired if I wanted them to stick around until she left, but I said I figured we'd be all right and would call if anything got heated. They handed me their business card before leaving, suggesting that I record everything, just in case. The instant they departed, Emil emerged from the bedroom, immediately going on a rant. She accused me of ruining Sarah's memory, of never truly caring for her, and that I was solely interested in her inheritance, though, honestly, what money? She threatened to sue me for everything I possessed. "Linda," I interjected, stopping her mid-sentence, "just gather your belongings and leave. After the stunt you pulled today, you should consider yourself fortunate that I'm not filing charges against you for attempted property theft." "You've changed," she hissed. "Sarah would be utterly disgusted by who you've become." That stung because I've been having similar thoughts about myself recently. Would Sarah even recognize the resentful, irritable person I've turned into? But then I recalled that Sarah always pushed me to stand up for myself, especially against her mother's attempts to control me. "No, Linda," I said in a subdued tone. "Sarah would be let down by you. She knew your true nature, and she always protected me from your subtle insults and attempts to undermine me. She would be horrified to see you trying to take our house from me after she passed away." Emil's face crumpled, and for a split second, I thought I saw a flicker of actual sorrow and regret. But it quickly shifted back to that familiar sense of self-importance and fury. "I'm calling my lawyer," she declared, pulling out her phone. "That's a good plan," I concurred. "And while you're at it, maybe you could ask about the legal repercussions of changing the locks on a place that isn't yours. I'm certain they'd find that quite interesting." She didn't offer a reply to that. She was furious and stormed off into the bedroom to keep packing. I spent the next few hours in the living room observing Linda moving back and forth, filling boxes and mumbling to herself. Even though I was completely drained, I was scared to leave her by herself, thinking she might try to ruin something or take stuff that wasn't hers. After all the stuff with changing the locks and saying my house was hers. Sarah and I had lived in that house for 7 years. I had absolutely no faith in her judgment. Around 7 p.m., she started bringing boxes and bags out to the front door. I got up to help not because I wanted to be nice, but because I really wanted to get rid of her as quickly as possible. She'd been living with me for 8 long months, and the last 6 of them had been without Sarah. I just needed to get my place back and finally start moving on. "Don't you dare touch my stuff," she barked when I reached for a box. "All right," I responded, retreating, "but you only have an hour remaining here." She made several trips out to her car, not accepting any assistance. I saw she was taking some of Sarah's stuff, picture albums, a few pieces of jewelry, and some books. I was about to say something, but then I considered that these were memories of her own daughter. Even though I was incredibly angry with her, I couldn't bring myself to stop a mother from holding on to mementos of her child. I knew because of the will that Sarah had already bequeathed her mother some jewelry and family photos, so I just let it slide. But then I saw her wrestling with Sarah's old writing desk, trying to drag it down the hallway. "What are you up to?" I exclaimed, getting up quickly. "That doesn't belong to you. Sarah's the one who owned it," she stated emphatically. "She'd want me to have it." "Nope," I responded with certainty. That desk had belonged to Sarah's grandmother, and she'd specifically left it to Sarah. "It's mine now. You aren't taking it." She attempted to debate the issue, saying Sarah had given it to her, but I held my position. "Put it back this instant, or I'm calling the cops again." With great reluctance, she let go of the desk. "You're a heartless, self-centered person," she muttered with venom. By the time it was 7:45, she'd pretty much packed up most of her possessions. I kept a close eye on her as she made the last few trips, making absolutely sure she wasn't grabbing any additional items that weren't hers to take. At last, she was in the entrance, with the remaining boxes that she hadn't put into her vehicle yet. "I need more time," she announced. "I can't possibly manage to fit everything in my vehicle tonight. I'd had enough of her games." "Your deadline is 8 o'clock, exactly as I mentioned. Everything that's still here at that time stays here, and I'll determine what happens to it. You can't just discard my things," she complained. "Just watch me," I answered without any emotion in my voice. She started crying again, saying I was being unfair, that she needed at least another 24 hours. After all that she'd put me through, I had no patience left whatsoever. "Today you tried to steal my house," I reminded her. "You changed the locks while I was at work, trying to prevent me from getting into my own home. You provided the police with false statements about owning this place. I don't owe you a single thing at this moment." She gazed at me for what seemed like forever, then her face shifted, taking on a scheming look. "What would Sarah think if she could see you behaving like this, kicking her own mother out into the cold?" "Don't you ever try to manipulate me by bringing up Sarah," I warned, my voice cracking with rage. "Sarah would be disgusted by your actions. She understood your true nature completely. Despite that, she chose to love you unconditionally because that was her character." A flicker of pain crossed her face, like I'd physically struck her. "Perfect, you have 15 minutes, I declared to her. "Pack whatever you can and leave." She made several more trips to her vehicle, moving at a snail's pace to drag out the process. Right at 8 o'clock, I began gathering up the remaining boxes. "What do you think you're doing?" she asked, rushing back inside after her final trip. "The time has expired," I stated plainly. I carried the first box to the front door, unlatched it, and placed the box on the porch. "Stop it," she screamed, reaching for the box. "Some of those items are delicate," I reminded her. I disregarded her and went back inside for the next box, and the next. She trailed behind me, switching between shouting and pleading, but I just kept steadily relocating her remaining possessions outdoors. By the time I got to the fifth box, she was completely losing it. "I'm going to call the authorities," she threatened, taking out her phone. "This isn't legal." "Do it," I said, putting another box on the growing stack by the street. "They already explained I have the legal right to make you leave my place. You should be thankful I'm setting these things by the roadside and not throwing them away." It seemed like she understood I wasn't joking around, because her approach instantly changed. "Please," she pleaded, her voice cracking with emotion. "I have absolutely no place to sleep tonight. Just let me stay for one more night and I'll leave first thing in the morning." I swear, for a brief second I almost gave in. This was Sarah's mom, after all. But then I recalled coming home to find my key wouldn't work in my own door, seeing her self-satisfied expression through the window, and the feeling of violation and powerlessness that flooded me. "Nope," I said with conviction. "You forfeited that right when you changed the locks on me. Call your sister, book a hotel, contact anyone you want, but you are not staying here." She just looked at me, and I could tell the instant she recognized I wasn't going to budge. Her expression became hard once more. "You'll regret this," she said coldly. "I'll tell everyone what you've done, how you've treated me. Sarah's friends, our family, they'll all hear about what sort of person you truly are." "Go right ahead," I responded, shocked to discover I genuinely didn't care. "Go tell them I kicked you out after you swapped the locks on my house and tried to take it away from me. See how that goes for you." I set the last box onto the heap and stood there facing her, my arms folded. "Our conversation is over. Get into your vehicle and leave." For a long moment we just stood there, staring at one another. She then spit on the pavement right in front of me, turned around, and left for her vehicle without uttering another sound. I kept watching as she drove off, not moving until her taillights were out of sight as they rounded the street corner. After that, I went back inside, shut the door, and replaced the locks once more. I ended up sleeping on the sofa that evening because I just couldn't bring myself to enter the bedroom. The place seemed unnaturally silent without her here, even though it had never felt good with her around. When morning arrived, I went outside and saw that every box had been taken away from the curb. I have no clue and don't really care if she returned for them or if somebody else grabbed them. I've dedicated today to cleaning the house and attempting to get everything organized once again. I discovered a few things missing, minor possessions of Sarah's that Amal must have grabbed before she finally departed. Some jewelry, photographs, even Sarah's beloved coffee mug. It makes me mad, but not to the point where I want to chase her down to get them back. Some disagreements simply aren't worth the effort. I also uncovered something unsettling, a poorly made document that seemed to be a will, purportedly signed by Sarah, bequeathing the house to her mother. It was a truly dreadful attempt, not even certified, with a signature that didn't resemble Sarah's in the slightest. So she was actually planning to steal my house with phony paperwork. I've set it aside, just in case I need it for proof later on. It's with the official paperwork that proves I'm the rightful owner, the same documents I showed the police yesterday. Sarah's sister phoned me this afternoon, really angry about the situation. It seems Amal told her a completely different story, saying I kicked her out without any notice and for no cause. I coolly described the actual events, including the changed locks and the phony will. The person on the other end of the line was quiet for quite a while. "That sounds just like her," Sarah's sister finally confessed. "She's always been a pain. She's living here with me right now, but I can't have her here permanently." "That's not my issue anymore," I responded. "I realize it seems heartless, but I'm finished being used and exploited. A part of me does feel some remorse, though. I keep pondering whether Sarah would be unhappy with my decisions. However, another side of me knows Sarah always backed me up when I set limits with her mom. She understood how manipulative Amal could be and often stepped in to shield me from her worst behaviors. Every single day, I miss Sarah terribly. The house still feels desolate without her. But for the first time since she passed, it feels like this is truly my home again. I can begin the healing process in the home we built, without Amal always being here and bringing up everything I've lost, plus trying to steal what little I still possess. Update tomorrow. Amal's sister called again. From what I understand, once she got to her place, Amal completely lost it and spilled all her secrets. She confessed she'd been plotting to get the house for ages, rummaging through Sarah's things to find a will or the property deed, and ultimately decided to create fake documents and change the locks. She even admitted she had discovered the actual will, the one that left everything to me, months ago and kept it secret. Sarah's sister was incredibly sorry she hadn't noticed anything and offered to help me recover anything Amal had stolen. I appreciated the offer but told her I just wanted to put it all behind me. Some of Sarah's possessions are missing, but I still have all the memories we made, and that's the most important thing. Amal is, I've heard, now getting therapy, which is long past the time she should have. A part of me wishes she gets the help she needs, but another part of me never wants to cross paths with her again. Grief causes strange behaviors in people, but it doesn't give anyone the right to try to steal someone's house. Right now, I'm concentrating on restarting my life in the house Sarah and I shared. I've also begun therapy, which is something I should have done a while ago. The cats are happy to have everything back to normal, particularly without Amal continuously chasing them off the furniture. It's going to be a long journey, but for the first time since Sarah passed away, I feel like I might eventually be all right. 1 week later, I wanted to let you know I got a handwritten letter from Amal today. I almost tossed it aside without even looking at it, yet my interest won out. The letter was 3 pages long, and the apology felt real. She gave an explanation, but didn't try to justify her actions, claiming sorrow had caused her to become unreasonable and desperate to keep anything related to Sarah. She admitted her actions were incorrect and said she doesn't anticipate being forgiven, but hoped I'd understand she was seeking help. I'm not in a place where I can forgive her right now, and I'm uncertain if I ever will be, though it's a tiny step towards finding some peace, I suppose. I've chosen not to reply for the time being. Perhaps sometime in the future, but not at this moment. As of now, I'm considering some renovations to the house, alterations that Sarah and I had discussed, though never actually carried out. It feels good to proceed, while still remembering the plans we created as a team. Baby,